Chapter 3. Hilary listened avidly as I told him about the iron find, and the reasons for the journey to Tanith. The presence of the Camberson commanders ensured that everyone who mattered would soon know, but since Bomar's sailors would in any case be spreading it around as gossip, that wasn't a problem. Nothing that concerned trade ever stayed a secret for long. I watched Hilary, I'm just going to call him Hilary, detected hope of more profit in his gaze. The iron would put Lipitor on the map, and Kula would benefit too, since more ships would call in on their way up the coast. The Kulans would be jealous, though. Lipitor would graduate from being a typical obscure clan like Kula to one of the biggest resource producers in Oceanus. I thought how lucky it was that Kula wasn't significantly more powerful military or otherwise than Lipitor, and that Count Courtiers was my father's oldest friend. "Are you going to look for a permanent contact in Tanith?" the Cambrisian captain Zasson asked. "With one of the great houses? I think so. The first advisor said that's what my father will want to do. You as well, young man." Mizrak, who had so far remained silent, said, "Get involved in these negotiations. Learn how it all works. Nothing beats a good deal." "Before you leave," Zanson said, "I'll give you a list of the houses that would be best for this. Most of them have no scruples at all and wouldn't hesitate to cheat you or bend the contract. There are only a few that actually honor their contracts to the letter, and they tend to be the biggest, although not the flashiest." "Thank you for that," I said gratefully. If Zanson's information matched his good intentions, it could save us hundreds of korons, which I guess is the money system, and several weeks of searching. "Pardon me for asking," Shahadin said to Zanson after a second of silence, "since you must have been asked this already, but what happened to your ship?" I'd been as curious as he was. "Attacked by someone, we were," Gano said, in a strange rough accent I'd never heard before. I wondered if he was Cambrasian at all. "There was an underwater storm surge out to sea about a week ago. You probably felt the tail end of it up on the Lipitor coast," Zanson explained. We were caught in the deep ocean and nearly pulled down. We only survived by the skin of our teeth, and threw Gano's skill at the helm. As soon as we could, we headed back toward the land to avoid any more that might be brewing, and find some safe cave to surface. There's only one on that part of the coast, and we searched for a whole day, but the place was nowhere to be seen. Eventually we spotted the mouth of the Liga River. It's hardly perfect with the currents and eddies, but there was nowhere else, and the Lion was still taking on water. We mounted a watch because the natives around there are none too friendly, and they'll sell their souls to get their hands on the manta. Turned out it wasn't the natives we had to worry about, Mizrak put in. Shouldn't it be butt in, but whatever. It was another manta that attacked us. "Another manta?" I said, wondering who would dare attack a ship of a Cambras. Even 30,000 miles away from Cambras itself. One simply didn't mess with them. They were the best sailors in the world, from what I knew. "Bigger than us, it was," Gano said. 250 yards wingtip to wingtip, and with darkened windows, black armor, too. That threw me. I knew that manta armor was always blue, the color of the pilot it was made from. So how could you get black armor? Zasan continued. Because we weren't expecting a sea attack, and our sensors were directed at the land. We didn't see the thing until it was only a few hundred yards away, and charging up its pulse cannon. So we're technologically advanced for, like, a type of submarine and a pulse cannon, but we're a seafaring society that uses chariots? I'm confused. Our own cannon were damaged. Our own cannon were damaged. That should be our own cannons were damaged, or our own cannon was damaged. But the watch got a torpedo off. I didn't see it hit. Then the black thing... Wait, you didn't see it hit? What? Oh, I guess they mean their own... They sent their own torpedo since they couldn't use the cannon. Okay. I didn't see it hit. Then the black thing started pounding us in earnest, trying to wear down the shields. And they even called on us to surrender. The hell spawn. All three took up the story after that, and I spent most of the time trying to piece together what had actually happened from the three accounts. The lion had been hit in 4 places, and serious damage done to its armor. The attacking manta had also fired torpedoes at the Cambrassians, and then, for no apparent reason, had turned away and headed back to the depths, as soon disappearing in the gloom. I've never heard of anything like this black manta, the S-Count said. Only Farasa and the Domain operate mantas in these waters, and why would they build a black ship and attack the Cambrassians? You're restating this shit. We get it. Farasa and Cambras are at peace, and it would be suicide for Farasa to make an unprovoked attack. It's possible the Manta was Imperial Navy, but that seems doubtful because it's too blatant for them even though they hate Cambras. As for the Domain, they don't paint anything black. Ranth's colors were red and orange. The Domain believed in light and fire, and that all darkness contained evil. What language did they speak? Shahardin asked. When they hailed you, I mean. Archipelagian, same language as everyone else. Maybe a bit of an odd inflection, but I couldn't tell you were from. What? Maybe a bit odd inflection, but I couldn't tell you were from. Oh, okay, I understand this sentence now, but I was confused. See, people talk like this, but it doesn't make for good reading, because then you get weird sentences like this. I think I've talked about accents before, where it's really not a good idea to write a whole thing with accents included, because that's just gonna get weird fast. It's better to pick 1 or 2 things that really make an accent or a style of speech and stick with that instead, like elongating E's or something. But I understand this sentence now. All I can say is that I'm not coming this way again without company, Gannon said. Will Cambras send a squadron to investigate? I asked. Cambras will send a squadron if the Great Council and the military stop quarreling for long enough to give the order, Zenson said, dryly. At present it takes hours of discussion to get them to agree on what day of the week it is. Worse than the Hellerites. Helltites. I guess it's Helltites. Mizrak said. Agreed, my bad. The Hellite Empire was the major power over most of the homeland continent, Equota, the only continent whose interior was inhabited by civilized people. From being a small colony in the years after the scattering, they'd risen to conquer the rest of the heartland. In recent years, the Hellatites' expansion down the twin rivers Ardennes and Baltaranes toward the sea had been cause for concern. Their territory now bordered that of Tanith itself. Fortunately for the rest of us, they had no deep-water ports or manta yards, and no fleet to speak of. The Tanthinians, with their 50-plus war mantas, controlled the river's mouths and stopped the Heltites going any farther, while the Thetians poured money in to maintain the status quo. Even from that little I knew about the region, I dreaded the thought that they'd ever break out. But most importantly, they were fully supported by the domain in all their conquests and attacks, to the extent that, as Shahardin had said, elaborating on the matter later, because this wasn't important later, so we're just going to talk about it now, just tell you something somebody said on the matter later. Sakai fanatics frequently fought beside the Heltites' armies against heretic settlements in the remote Equotian highlands. Have they campaigned recently? the Viscount asked. Not recently, but there's some bad news for the rest of us. Regolith Eshar has returned from exile. Hilary's smile disappeared, and he reached for his gem-studded goblet. Regolith? Prince Regolith, the brother of the King of Kings? The same. He appeared in a remote fishing town far in the southland, outside Haleti borders, and when the king heard, he welcomed him back with open arms. It's said that Regolith has changed, though, that he's lost what humanity he ever had. Precious little that was, Gano said. Who's Regolith Eshar? I asked tentatively, looking from Hilary to Zazan. I was reluctant to display my ignorance, but I was anxious to know what they were talking about. You haven't heard of him? Zazan shifted position on his couch, pulling a fold of his tawny-colored captain's cloak out from under his chest. I suppose Lipitor has nothing to do with Haleth, so their affairs wouldn't concern you. They will now that you intend to deal with Tanith. The Cambrasian captain told me that Regolith Eshar was the present Haleti King of Kings' blood brother. No one knew exactly where he was from, and he hadn't been heard of for 6 years ago. Before 6 years ago. That should be a since. I guess the before is okay. Not really sure. But he'd proven to be an excellent soldier. He had won several battles for the King of Kings of that time, and with his conquest of the last refuge of the Galadins, his fame had threatened to eclipse that of his blood brother Achirib, the heir to the throne. A year ago, Alchirib had murdered his father, oh my, and assumed the crown. Assassins had been sent after Regolith, then on another campaign, but he had eluded them and disappeared. Alchirib had proclaimed Regolith's exile, but not ordered his death. Since then, nothing had been heard of Regolith. Why has Alchirib welcomed him back, though? Aurelius asked. Surely Regolith poses a threat to his brother's power. It may mean that Alchirib believes he can keep Regolith under control, or that they've struck a bargain of some kind. The danger for the rest of us is that Regolith is the best commander the Hellites have. Tanith and her satellites will be in even more danger. Surely only the small clans, not Malith or Uka. If the Hellites move against them, it's possible that Malith or Uka will fall after a long siege. And if Malith falls, the gateway is open for the Heltonites to threaten Tanith. I know I keep changing the word, I'm sorry. Tanith is impregnable, of course, because it's on an island and the Helltites don't have a fleet, but their territory could be severely pared down, and upriver trade restricted. All this assumes, of course, that the Helltites believe they can threaten or attack Tanith, Mizrak said. The King of Kings is canny enough to realize the importance of Tanith's trade to his people, as are his allies of the domain. More likely, they'll demand a heavy yearly tribute. The Tanithan merchants will pay it, and life will go on as before. Tribute was an accepted substitute for war and control used all over the world. It was expensive. Harasa's demands had nearly ruined Lipitor a few years ago, but I suppose better than war. I knew that merchants, with the exception of arms dealers, didn't prosper in wartime. Since it, what? Granted, I don't know anything about war making, but I'm pretty sure that it's vital to grow food and make cloth and things, and that the army will likely employ many of these people to make food and clothes for their troops. So I'm not really sure what we're talking about here. War, to the best of my knowledge, while it can be a drain on resources, can also help, make money in advanced societies. So, since it was the merchants who ruled most of Aquasilva's clans, generally the clans would pay a tribute to any oppressor, usually either the Helltites or the Thetan Empire, and go on with their business. Both parties would benefit, the merchants from keeping their peaceful trade, and the receiver of the tribute from the money. All states on Equota often considered it beneath their dignity to pay tribute, and would refuse it and consequently be destroyed. I wondered how they could be as blind as that, and not see how outmatched they were. Any rational Aquasilvan put profit before pride. You don't know people that well, do you? With the possible exception of Halites and Archipelagians. It would be the first time the Halatites have shown sense, Zanson said. Usually they can't see past the end of their swords. Cities in the interior are one thing, Tanith is another. And they do have little niceties on their side like elephant cavalry, which the Halatites are no match for, and the support of the rest of the world. You guys have torpedoes and pulse cannons. Why are you riding around in chariots and using elephants? I don't understand. Which the Halatites are no match for, and the support of the rest of the world. Is the rest of the world sensible enough? Shahardin said, drinking deeply from his wineglass. I hadn't touched my own yet, and I took a few sips, so as not to seem impolite. It was guest wine, the best in the household, reserved for when important strangers came visiting. That the Viscount had brought out his best wine for a mere manta captain showed how far the shadow of Cambras reached. We should be, Zanson said, and added, if we'd stop squabbling. Mizrak glowered briefly at the Cambrassian, but I felt he held no rancor, and was merely making a point. Over who owns Mon's fairness, possibly, said the Viscount, in addition to your internal disputes. That's a sore matter with us at the moment, Ghana said, and likely to be for a while. I don't doubt that if Tanith is threatened, though, the admirals will stop their quarreling and do something to help. I think we're worrying ourselves too much, Zanson said. Even if the Halatites attack Malith, and if they refuse the tribute, it will be 10 years or more before Tanith is in serious danger, and in 10 years a lot could happen. And what's that supposed to mean, Mercerk asked sharply. Nothing much, Zenson replied cagily. I propose a toast, Hilor said. Oh my God, not Hillary said loudly to peace, prosperity, and the confusion of the Helltites. I'll drink to that, Misrick said, draining his goblet in a long draught. The conversation continued after that on matters of far less importance, mostly concerning the intricacies of trade. Servants came in and lit oil lamps raised on marble columns as the evening drew on outside the windows. The few remaining noises from the harbor ceased. Later on we ate supper in the Count's personal dining hall, a larger room than the one we'd been talking in, its floor tiled with geometric patterns that I could remember staring at during an interminable diplomatic event several years ago. The food, too, was honored guest quality, and I welcomed relief from fish. It was traditional that one didn't serve fish to sailors in port, because they ate so much of it while at sea, and were grateful for the change. When will your ship be leaving tomorrow? The Viscount asked Shahardin, as we sat around the table. Late morning sometime, after Beaumar's finished his business. Oh, you're with Beaumar, are you? Halor grinned. He demanded an audience with me on the way up, complaining he'd been short-changed by one of the merchants. It was just a zero in the wrong place in his ledger. Well, I'll offer you hospitality for the night, of course, and send a servant to wake you up an hour in advance, if you're not up already. If you don't mind, Lord Hilary, can we turn in now? Zazen said, yawning. It's been a long day, and there are more repairs tomorrow. I'd offer to take you people on to Farasa, except the lion won't be in fighting trim for another 4 or 5 days. Oh, and I better draw up that list as well. Been writing materials, the Viscount said to a slave, who hurried away and returned soon with a piece of scroll and a quill pen, which he handed to Zazan. The Cambrissian captain propped the tablet on his knee and began to write. I'll put them in order of size. A bigger concern usually has more money to keep its ships in turns. A bigger concern? Okay. House Hiram is the biggest, and the second largest house in Tanith. They trade all over the world. The second is House Banitas, only slightly smaller. Third, House Gillereth, who only trade to the east and north. No concerns in Husa. Theta, or the interior of Equotria. Fourth, House Dashban, a new house on the way up that should go far. Fifth, House Barca. They're old and were almost ruined by years of mismanagement, but they have a new house head with a reputation for honesty. Anyone you ask who lives there will know where the palaces for all 5 are. Gillereth and Barca can be hard to contact, as they both have strongholds along the delta. Thank you again, I said. Zasan stood up, and the rest of them followed. May you strike a profitable bargain and prosperity shine on Lipitor. May your ship win all its battles and prosperity shine on Cambras. And Mons Fairness, Miss Rick said, glaring again at Zasan's back. Both of them erupted into laughter, no doubt helped by the amount of wine they drunk. Servants guided Shahardin and I. Well, no, wait. Servants guided... Yeah, I guess that would be me. Because if you take out Shahardin there, it's going to be weird saying servants guided I. To a large, well-appointed chamber looking out over the sea. I knew mine well. I'd stayed here several times before, and I was too tired to do much more than simply fall asleep. I'd have 2 glasses of wine the night before, I realized in the morning, It was dangerously close to my limit, and I was lucky to be awake at all. Neither of the Cambresians were anywhere to be seen, nor was the Escount, even several hours after dawn. But Miss Reck was sitting on a bench in the corner of the kitchens when we went down to grab some provisions. Despite having had a large number of drinks the night before, he seemed perfectly clear-headed. "Watch out for that black manna, boys," he said amicably as we turned to leave. "You'll be going past that river mouth. Oh, and there was something Zetson was too proud to admit last night. Since I wasn't one of the crew, my pride isn't damaged. But don't pass this on." "What?" Shahardin asked. I noticed him wincing slightly as a shaft of sunlight from one of the windows fell on his face. "That's what you get for drinking so much." He'd had a lot more to drink than I had the night before. "That ship was commanded by a woman. The voice that called on us to surrender was definitely female, and we heard another woman's voice in the background. They were both a bit muffled, but definitely belonged to women." "This gets even more peculiar," Shahardin said after we'd taken our leave of Miss Rack and the palace, and were walking back through the early morning bustle to the harbor. "The Archipelagians are the only people outside Mons Fernus who have women warriors of any kind, and they're all ceremonial temple guards, like the rest of their army." "Do the Mons Fertans have women warriors?" I asked, startled, trying to visualize such a thing. "The Mons Fertans are a strange lot. They have an elite corps consisting entirely of women that guards their most treasured asset. But while they would have a reason to attack a Cambresian Manta, if they thought they could get away with it, they're 3 months' journey from Mons Fernus here. The Mons Fertans have no interest up here, and they never have slipped past all the patrols burning the cities without being noticed. None of it makes any sense." We walked out along the harbor gate to the accompaniment of screeching gulls and saw the Parasaurus sails being hoisted. "Looks like we're a little late for Master Bomar," I said, spotting the Parasaurus master waving urgently from his deck. "Better hurry up." I nearly slipped up on a fish carcass, and Shahardin bruised his knee on an anchor, but we made it around the harbor's edge and up the Parasaurus gangway in record time. "What have you been drawing around for?" Bormar demanded. "It's still half an hour to when you wanted us to be here," Shahardin said. "To hell with that. We have to get well past the mouth of that devil-cursed river by nightfall. I have no intention of losing my ship to a fleet of the minions of darkness." Ahead, Kula's cutter was already attached by its tow rope, and Bomar's first mate gave the order to cast off. Saul, my gorilla-like escort, was helping the sailors. Kula was friendly territory, so he hadn't needed to accompany us. For us it would be a different matter. "We're clear," the first mate shouted. "Row!" Bomar yelled at the Kulan-colored commander, who gave a cheery grin and barked an order to his crew. I could see Bomar almost jumping with impatience as the Pastor swung slowly around and was pulled out of the lagoon. We took up our accustomed places on the bale and watched the scenery go past. The harbor smells of rope, pitch, chalks, and fish gradually faded as we drew abreast of the entrance. Out at sea, Bomar hardly paused to throw the pouch across to the cutter with the pilot's fee in it before heading the ship southwest at full speed. The Parsora's crew had evidently been talking to the Cambresian Manta crew the previous night, and clearly they'd all been drunk. Well, that's what a lot of people do. They get trashed. It seemed natural that the Cambresians would exaggerate the enemy's strength to lessen their shame at being caught unaware. Okay, I just want to say something, because it's a pet peeve of mine. It says unawares. I hate that, because the word is unaware, not unawares. And I will murder anybody who puts a fucking S at the end of that word. It's annoying. But they've taken their tale-telling to ridiculous lengths. Doubtless the story would be all over Farasa when they docked, and then no master would sail up coast without an armed escort, which would hardly be good for trade. If the sailors' accounts were to be believed, the lion had been attacked by at least 10 black mantas, all with huge numbers of pulse banks and 16 torpedo launchers. However, as the water was very shallow, many of the projectiles had missed, because any sane man knew that fighting inshore was very difficult, even for servants of evil blood-sucking creatures that were accustomed to seeing in the dark. The Cambrasians had rallied bravely and severely damaged 3 of the enemy, causing them to melt away into the night, with chilling howls and the sound of unearthly music coming through the water. This sounds like bullshit. Like, even if I didn't know the actual story, this sounds like bullshit. This sounds like a fish's tale. Amazing how things can be exaggerated, isn't it? Shahardin said thoughtfully, as we plowed on under the midday sun, now sitting under one of the awnings always rigged up at this time of day, when the sun became too harsh to stay out under. If we hadn't heard the true version last night from Zansen and from Ms. Rick, how would we know what to believe? For all we know, Reglith Eshar's reputation as a commander could stem from a single charge in a single battle, which was built upon my rumor and magnified out of all proportion, so that now enemies flee at the mere mention of his name. Sailors are a superstitious lot, and more prone to exaggeration than others, I said, thinking about his words. I would think a hard-headed merchant would be able to scale the story down and guess how it actually was, realize that the lion wouldn't have survived against 3 mantas, let alone 10. I don't know, perhaps, Shahardin said, his eyes staring into the distance, out over the restless sea. But now you have seen how stories and myths begin. Maybe in 50 years' time, Zansen and his crew will be shining heroes of a long-ago era who battled valiantly against the devil's horde until Ranthus sent a thunderbolt down out of the sky and saved them, or something of that kind. Maybe they will become prophets of Ranthus, and someone will invent a prophecy of Zansen. That is what's wrong with the domain as well. We make up prophecies. Did you know that? Any Magnus who starts prophesying is locked up immediately, and his sayings recorded, then altered to suit the domain's plans. That's why so many of them say destroy all heretics. Some magi even invent their foretellings quite cynically. Don't the zealots disapprove? They don't disapprove of anything that gives them an excuse to hunt down more heretics. They are interested in the purity of Ranthas's faith, certainly, but they only want to turn their attention to the domain itself once all heretics are wiped out. Le Chazar's different. He thinks that the house has to be put in order first, but he really is on the lunatic fringe. You paint a stark picture of the domain, I said, looking at Shahardin, seeing only his profile still gazing off into the distance. He was prone to these periods of thought and pensiveness, and when he was like this I could see what he was really like. A dreamer, I concluded 2 days ago, only one with his feet planted in the real world. It seems to be the truth. I just hope I can make a difference, do something to change it, and bring something of the mysticism that has been lost back into it. without killing hundreds and thousands of people, as Lajars would, screw this guy's name, Lacharzar would prefer. Shahardin's voice was taking on an almost sporific tone, lulling the senses. I made a conscious effort to shake off the creeping drowsiness this included until I could feel again the motion of the boat and the rushing of water beneath the hull. Do you think you can? I asked, not wanting to disturb Shahardin's calm. If I can rise high enough, perhaps I will be able to reform a city. As Prime, I would make the domain what it was meant to be, an organization for worshipping Ranthus and educating men. After a long pause, Shahardin shook his head and tore his gaze away from the far distance. Around us, the sailors were sitting in small groups gambling. I just want to pause and say that even if Shahardin manages to do this, it's only going to last for his reign as head of everything. What's, I guess, the basic equivalent of Pope. And, that's still not going to influence everybody who's a part of this religion. And it's, again, only going to be his influence until he dies. And then somebody else is going to take his place. And it's really not going to matter what he thought when he reigned. Especially considering from what he's describing, there are a lot of shitheads as part of this religion. And he's going to make a lot of enemies by denouncing the actions of these guys. So either he's going to be assassinated, which would be highest heresy and treason, but they're going to quickly replace this guy with somebody who's A-okay with what they're doing and probably would do their best to promote them doing more than that. So there would be a lot more would have to change than just you getting charged. That's sort of a naive viewpoint for somebody who's like 23. But then again, I didn't know what I know now at 23, so... They played with wooden counters because their voyage wages were either already spent or in Bomar's hands. Bomar snorted on a pile of canvas under an awning of the foredeck. Only the helmsman and one other were on the deck, and 3 up in the crow's nest, changing shifts at regular and short intervals. What do you make of the Black Manta, then, Cathan? Shahardin said. The creatures of the night, renegade Pharasians, Thetan operatives, Mons Ferreton's assassins, domain fanatics? You haven't said much about what you think, only asked questions. That's because you've been solving the problem for me. I was only wearing a tunic, yet I still felt uncomfortably hot. I took a swig of the diluted lemon juice that was drunk to relieve thirst on board ship. Only speculating. You know much more about the way the world works than I do, I said. This mysterious feud between Montfernes and the Cambres isn't the talk of Lepador. We've hardly even heard of it. Why should you? Why should you? High politics over on the other side of the world. What? That's a fragment. Let's see, how would you fix that? Why should you? And then a semicolon. It's high politics over on the other side of the world. Yeah, because otherwise it's just, why should you, ? High politics over on the other side of the world. There's not that... Again, people talk like this, but you don't write like this. I'll explain what's happening later. It requires an ability to think clearly, which the heat saps away. Shahardin leaned back against the planking. You keep on thinking about it. I'll listen until I can find a reason why anyone would attack the Cambrasian Manta in the dead of night and then run off again. Hopeless, Shahardin threw up his hands in despair. Does your brain vinaigrate when you spend your life in a palace? I don't even know what that's supposed to imply or mean, but okay. The next day and night, Bomar pushed his men to the limits, dropping anchor in the harbor of the tiny settlement of Koras, a friendly tribal fishing village, 3 or 4 hours after sunset. In the morning, the village headman, who was clearly pure tribesman, like most of his population, came down to greet us. Bomar apologized for a late arrival, but curiously enough, there was no reaction of horror or fright when the headman was told about the Black Manta. He simply nodded his weazened old head sagely, bargained some fruit and supplies for a little of Bomar's cargo, and wished us well on our journey. We encountered no trouble of any kind the next night, and on the morning of the 4th day after Linkula, the seventh out of Lipador, we rounded Vextar Island and sighted Farasa. This book, it's okay. If this sounded at all interesting to you, pick it up. It seems fine, the 3 chapters I've read thus far. It's really too describe-y for me. I was talking about this with my brother earlier. It's when you set up a fantasy world, you want to tell your reader just enough that they get it. You know, I believe that you're in a fantasy world, you know. You explain that the world is pretty much like Pirates of Darkwater. And I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. It's a water world instead of mostly, you know, earth and water. You know, instead of continents, really, you mostly have islands with people living on the islands. The rest and the way you get around is through ships and subs and stuff. I'm like, okay, I understand that. So I really just need to be told a little bit of this. I really could give a shit less about economics and commerce. I don't pick up a fantasy book to study that. I pick up a fantasy book to read fantasy. And aside from some grammar issues and missing some words, and this guy clearly needs an editor to go back and overlook his stuff, it's fine. I mean, that's really my only problem is we're way too description based. We repeat ourselves sometimes. We miss words sometimes. Sometimes we mess up sentences. And we just really need to focus on bringing more action into the book than describing scenery and talking. Like, instead of waiting to like chapter 3, this should have been this whole thing about the lion being attacked should have been in chapter 2. And then we had some, and then in chapter 3, that's when shit goes down, and Catherine is like, holy fuck, there's something seriously wrong here. But this book is so wordy and so slow paced. And it's not bad if you like that kind of book. That's fine. But I want some fucking action. And I'd say this is really the opposite of show, don't tell. This is telling. It's telling, but it's also showing, but it's too much. It is too much. Cut some of this out and rewrite it. And again, that's my only problem with this book. Pick up Heresy by, let me try to pronounce this guy's name again, Anselm Audley. If it sounds interesting to you and you care about commerce and the politics of religion and a weird society where they have torpedoes and pulse cannons, but they ride around in chariots and have elephants for attacking shit. That makes sense. Yeah, sure. That's a thing. I'm Caleb, and this has been Red Knot. Thank you for listening. Bye!